Hey there. As you've seen, well, we may not all spend time cutting big pieces into little pieces on the saw, but frequently when you're cross-cutting pieces to length, you'll square off one end, then flip it over and cut it to length, usually with some kind of a guide. What happens is you'll end up with a bunch of these little pieces building up on the right-hand side, or yes, if you're working on this side, the other side, one way or the other, you're gonna get a stack of pieces there. And as you saw, they can walk back. If they're small enough, the air current of the blade moving will actually lift them a little bit and it can toss them back into the blade and kick them at you. Now, with a guard, that's not happening, but because of the size and height of our crosscut fence, in this case a real crosscut fence, the guard can't go over that very easily, and most of the time not at all. So you end up working without it. So we've got a little cool accessory for your table saw that will help get these pieces away from the blade. So what we're building is a small parts deflector. Now there's a couple things going on here. One, we have an angled piece of scrap, which is literally a piece of scrap. I haven't even cut off the other end, but I've taken it over to the chop saw and cut a 45-degree on this one end. Thickness-wise, you don't want it too thick because it's being held in place by magnets, rare earth magnets that we've recessed in a couple of holes and then used hot melt glue to put in, and I'll talk about that in a second. But if you use too big a stick, then the magnets have to work harder. So you want it to get a reasonable thickness, but it still needs to be thick enough so that you can recess the magnets. So simply, I just took the stick and a Forstner bit that's a little oversized for the magnet size, and you can use whatever magnet size you have handy or can find from the store. Drill a little bit, check the depth, drop the magnet in there, see if it's recessed, and you actually want to be a little bit below. In our case, I went ahead and used hot melt glue to hold the pieces in place, the magnets in place. You could use super glue as well, gel type super glue or whatever, but hot melt works great, and it was easy enough to set these two pieces in place, and now our magnets are ready to go. Now there's a couple of things when you go to place this in place. Again, the size of it, well, you see the middle of the table. We want to make sure that the magnets contact. So I actually took the scrap and I put it here pretty close to where it was, and I got a sense of where the marks were. And you'll see I put a couple of pencil marks there, and that's where I made my holes. You want to locate this, and it's going to actually move a little bit forward and back. You find out the height of the piece that you're using and set your table saw height. Now what happens is we want to make sure that the piece that you're cutting is all the way cut through before it engages with this leading edge of the point. So if you put it here, and the piece isn't cut all the way through, it's going to start to push this into the saw, and you don't want to do that. So we want to make sure that the piece is cut all the way clear, so it's about that height. And then we're putting this here, and you want to get it close to the blade, but not too close. It's going to slide a little bit, but happily it's below the teeth, so even if it were to get touched against it, it's just going to run on the body. Not a bad thing, and it's not going to hurt you, okay? So you want to locate this fairly close, and it doesn't have to be in parallel with it, but you want to make sure that it's angled in there. And so we're going to call it there, right there. And here's the thing. Now, the little pieces, you're still going to have the same problem with them being too small and the air current kicking them up. So you're still going to have a little bit of a concern on that, but when you're cutting bigger pieces, not a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and square off the end of this, flip it around and cut it to the length that we want. And we'll do that on a few more pieces and see how this wonderful trick works. So our waste pieces are deflected away from the dangerous part of the blade. Now here's something else. This blade, this throat plate that's in here, it's not a very good zero clearance plate, and I might suggest that you use something that is a good zero clearance because that's going to keep any small pieces from getting trapped in there as well, and it'll actually keep the airflow from being deflected up and causing the pieces to move around too. So a couple of table saw tips and keep your scraps out of the way.